everyone. Welcome to another fabulous edition of Deliberately Intentional. Today, I have an amazing guest in the studio, someone that's super special to me, my son, Charles.
Hi, everybody.
Today's topic is intentional parenting because I talk about intentionality a lot. Now it's better to even have the person that I've used all that intentionality on in the studio today. So the most intentional thing I've done today is tone down my entire look. I'm in all black. His favorite color.
Yeah.
Your favorite color is black and
Blue.
his dad's favorite color is blue and green. I can wear every single color. But the reason why I'm bringing that up is intentionality. When you give the people around you what it is that they actually like, it makes everything a little bit easier, smoother, better. Now, being that this is his favorite color, I felt that it would make him feel a little bit more comfortable in the studio. It's not like he's not used to his mother's fabulosity. He is, but he actually prefers like this. This is my hoodie, actually, because even though we all wear hoodies and cruise, and I borrow his stuff, and I think you've borrowed this one too.
Yes, I have.
So we tend to do that a lot in our household, but just making sure that you understand your audience, in any audience, whether it's your child, your husband, your girlfriend, your wife, your coworkers, understanding the people around you and drawing them in with their favorite colors or things that that they like will make your message go across even better. So how do you feel about this look, sir?
I like your outfit a lot.
Hey, but he had one complaint.
I feel like I didn't see the earrings beforehand, but there's nothing wrong with the earrings, honestly.
I had to bring a little bit of myself into it. I can't
Bring yourself in anyway.
This is true. I always do. So, my intentional child.
Yes.
How has your intentional childhood been?
Obviously, the word intentional being there, it was very intentional. It was deliberate.
Yeah, using all the keywords. I love you. I correct somebody.
Yes.
But no, seriously.
Okay.
What's been the highlight of it all for you? Highlight of your childhood?
My childhood obviously led into a great adulthood. So all the intentional things like my friends, how I was raised, my independence, all led up into how I am today.
Oh. When people say that you're quiet, are you?
Yes and no. If I'm quiet, it's either A, I'm thinking, or I have a lot of thoughts going through my brain. I'm trying to figure out which of those many thoughts I am going to say. So if I'm quiet, I'm either in thought or I have nothing to say.
Oh, that's the one, yeah, because I have taught him. You know that one thing that everyone says online is like, if you have nothing good to say nothing. Some of y'all were not taught that. Yeah, you?
I definitely was taught that, yeah.
You were definitely taught that. But how has having an intentional mom, how has that shaped who you are?
Well, obviously it shaped who I am today, the person sitting in front of this microphone. It raised me as a person who can think critically, who can be decisive when he needs to be, when he can see the error of his ways and ask for help as well.
Yeah, uncle. I always say that to most people, when we talk about being intentional, I always tell you guys that it means that you need to understand that everything is connected. Everything that I've thought about Charles and what I wanted for him, I've thought about it since I was pregnant. I've been planning this individual that you see here today. I've been planning for him since I was pregnant. And I literally put everything into that. A lot of people don't realize that when it comes to parenting, it's an everyday thing. In what specific way do you think that intentional parenting has affected your decision-making process?
I think for me, when I'm making my decision, I'm always clear cut. I always look at all the facts and all the decisions and what could happen by the answers of these decisions. So I'm always clear headed, thankfully, because of my mom's intentionality. I know there's some people who get anxious when they're making these like big life changing decisions. Thankfully, there's no anxiety involved when I make these decisions. So very grateful for my mom's upbringing in that sense.
I think the details that because my son does not like being on camera. Agreed?
Yeah.
He doesn't. As much as I put a camera in his face all his life, he does not like being on camera. But I think what I want people to understand is that if you push your kid to make decisions from an early age, they become more and more confident making decisions. And so one thing that I've always done with Charles is I've always made sure to tell him, to push him to make certain decisions. And even when he makes a mistake, what happens when you make a mistake?
I learn from it.
And
I know it's not the end of the world if I
no,
make
it's not
these
the end of the
mistakes.
world. Yeah. And I also use myself as an example because I tell him my mistakes as well too. So I tell him when I make mistakes. His dad does the same thing. We use ourselves as examples. I say that Charles is, believe it or not, even though he's my son, he is also one of my best friends. So we don't have secrets. We also don't judge each other. I don't judge him. He does not judge me. I can still parent. That's the biggest thing. I am still a parent, even though I am his friend. Big difference. I have no problem telling him up, but then my kind of friendship is also different. I'm not the kind of friend that's going to let anything just slide. So I don't let anything slide with him either. And believe it or not, he doesn't let anything slide with me either.
Yeah.
It
goes both ways.
It goes both ways. And that's another good thing about intentional parenting, that if you use that to your advantage, you'd be surprised that your children will respond a whole lot better. Do you want to give us an example of one of those intentional moments and how it has shaped you? One very intentional. I know there's a few, but let me see the first one that comes to mind.
Very intentional moment. Back in river school, when me and all my really close UN friends, that we call them UN friends because we're all from
Different countries.
Yeah, we were all on the playground, and you intentionally connected us all, and we're still friends to this day.
Yeah, I think of course I'll help you embellish that.
Yeah.
I'm very intentional about friendships. And I've taught him that from the very beginning. He has friends that he's had since the age of 2. And of course, when did you take over the friendship? Like you're doing the connecting. I'm still doing the connecting because I feel like I still talk to some of your friends more than you do.
Maybe in high school and in college, I'm like
High school and college, but I still talk to them a little bit more than you do though.
that is true.
I talk to most of his friends more than he does. But the point I'm trying to make is that intentionality regarding understanding how important your friendships are why I was very much involved initially. You see, when he was growing up, I think you were 2. Yeah. We were in preschool. That wasn't even preschool. That was daycare.
Yeah.
We had friends that we had other people, other parents that we were all just waiting to pick up our kids. And we had a couple of moments in between whereby in between picking up your kids and when they closed down the playground. So we let our kids run around the playground within the school. In those moments, we actually all connected. So you could watch and see the dynamics of everybody's household just by watching who was running things. So most of the people that we were connecting with, I was very structured. Of course, the first thing that comes to my mind is I'm looking for other parents that are equally structured. So what do you look for in those moments? I was just looking for people that, okay, they could tell their kids when it was time to leave, and those kids listened. Do you remember there was a kid that was always rolling on the floor when it was time to go?
Yeah.
And I was not. I couldn't tell other people how they should run their household, but I can align myself with the people that seemed like their values were similar to mine. If you can control your situation, your dynamics in your household, then that to me is a good sign. So when I told Charles, I used to always tell him then to look on his little watch. Do you remember the way we used to do it? So you tell the story. How did I tell you when it was time for us to leave a park or anywhere?
So I would have like a little, it was a Swatch or a Casio watch back then.
But the first one I think was a Mickey Mouse, because you liked Mickey Mouse at one point in time. Then you liked Teletubbies. Then you liked, but I can't remember what I think the first one was a Teletubbies because it was one I had from London.
Yeah.
So it was a Teletubbies watch.
Yeah.
So you had a Teletubbies watch.
Yeah. And then you would be like, you would give me like reminders, like 5 minutes, or you would give me like a timer. It would be like, okay, when this hits 5 o'clock or this time, it's time to go.
It's time to go. But the point is that from the very beginning, he was always very structured. And so I looked for people that were similarly aligned. They were doing the same things, not the same way, but similar. Like when they said it was time to go, the kids listened. To me, that means that one, your kid is well behaved, because Charles at that point in time, even at 2, he was also well behaved. And if you understand that peer pressure is very real, you have to understand that if I don't put my kids around people that are like-minded, then it's going to unravel. Basically, everything I'm doing, you're going to see that there's another way to do it. So you're going to go that way. Simple. But carry that to the future, carry that to where we are right now.
So now I am 21 years old, 22 at the end of this year, believe it.
Yeah, really aiming on that 22. We are just started the year. You're already talking about November. But yeah.
So
Structure.
I'm super structured. I'm super decisive, very independent, a little too independent at sometimes. And I'm ultimately always me.
Ultimately always you. But back to our UN conversation, we met those people when he was 2, and the people that we connected with then, and I thought, well, you know, having that vision and thinking about the fact that I wanted him around people that were like-minded, that we were all intentional about our kids. All of us are still connected to today, and that's 18, it's almost 19 years later. 19 years later, all the kids are still connected. Of course, he wasn't the one doing the connecting initially. It was all on the parents. So if you're thinking, if you're listening to this and you're a parent and you're wondering, like, how can I help my kids with their friendships? It starts with you. Your kids can't go to school or have passions or have hobbies and you're not involved. Because if I wasn't involved, thoroughly involved, and I just picked him up and I was like, okay, I gotta go, then there would have been so many opportunities that we would have missed. We wouldn't have met, I mean, can you imagine that? We wouldn't have met the people that we've met at each school. At every single school that he's gone to, he's made friends that are still his friends to today. We have friends from you have friends from daycare, you have friends from elementary school, you have friends from high school, and you have friends from even though he was in Nigeria for a very short time, you have friends from Nigeria too that you're still friends with today.
Yeah.
But yes, as intentional parents, it's super important that you also get involved. Do you like how involved we've been in your life?
I do. Sorry.
So what does that look like when people don't have the same level of support that you have?
Ultimately, they would end up being confused because they don't know which way to go. They don't know what they want from life, what they want to do.
Okay. How do you think that intentional parenting has influenced your life so far?
Besides making it me who I am today, it has also changed the way I think about the world and my friends and what I want out of life.
Okay. So what do you want out of life?
I want to be fulfilled and happy.
Yep.
And
Are you not happy now?
More fulfilled and more happy, and to create a happy family as well.
Okay.
Keep that going.
Are there any challenges that you face with this intentional way that I've raised you?
I think the one challenge I faced was when I came back to middle school after being in Nigeria for half a year. Even though it was just half a year, it was almost like a year or almost 2 years almost that I was like, I had like my friends back home. I was still friends with them, but we weren't connecting the same as we used to.
Okay. So you were too far, you feel that because you were too far in the future, you couldn't connect with the people that were around you.
Yeah.
I think if I were to look back on that time, and to say that story from the beginning, there was a point in time that, well, actually, to say the story the best way is that there was a point in time that I was thinking about him going to high school in Nigeria. He actually went to high school there, but there were other passions that he had that were not aligning with the whole high school in Nigeria situation. I had been thinking about that. His dad was raised different from me. I had gone to boarding school, and I felt that boarding school was a very good way for a child to gain independence. So for him, he had been traveling by himself for, I think, when did you start traveling by yourself?
8, 9.
7. It was a 7-year first trip to Florida by yourself.
7 then.
7. I think it was 7.
Yeah.
And then you started going to Nigeria 8, 9. So he had done a couple of years of solo travel. But I felt like him being away from us would also give him a level of independence. If I could do it over again, I wouldn't have done it that way. I don't have regrets. I'm not one that regrets life. But now that I'm older and I know more, because I feel like as people, we do things based on what we know at that point in time. And at that point in time, I was thinking more about, I want him to be independent. I didn't realize that him leaving one side of town and going to school somewhere else would make a difference to how he started thinking. I thought it would be an easy fix. Oh, you know what? You were there. It didn't work out. You can go back. But for him, it ended up being a whole lot. It was worse for him. And we weren't even able to, he wasn't even able to communicate that. You didn't know how to communicate that with us either. Why?
Good question.
No, but it is a good question because we've talked about it, and I didn't realize that it was a problem until he got to another school, and I saw like this insane excitement. I'm like, oh, okay, wait. So what was going on? Because that was how I knew
Yeah.
I was there, but you just didn't tell me. Why didn't you?
I guess because I saw like another opportunity at this new school where it was like, oh, people who are also like minded like me, that really excite me versus where I was before where I'm seeming like I'm so far ahead.
Gotcha. But you didn't tell us though.
I also didn't know how to.
Very good. Though I think and that's something that parents and other people as well don't realize is that it's not that communication is not one of his problems. He is very articulate. But I realize that sometimes people think that there's something wrong. They know something's wrong, but they don't know what exactly it is that
And
is wrong.
yeah, and it's when you see something else, then you're like, oh, that
That's
was a
what
problem.
was
Yeah.
wrong. We had another one of those moments in December.
Really?
Yes, with you. When you went out.
Oh yeah.
So he went out with one of his friends and he was like, oh, it's so different, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, yeah. So he's like, you know what? I think I'm coming back home. Prior to that, he was not saying he was coming back to New York. All of a sudden now he's like, yep, I'm coming back home. I'm staying home, what have you.
Yeah.
But back to the whole school, to that challenge, because that challenge is super important because for him, and I should be letting you say this because this is really your story, but I know you so well
Yeah.
that it's easy for me to say these things and explain it and give it more light. But I guess if you take anything away from this conversation, is that it can be hard to tell people what you've not even figured out that is wrong. And sometimes it's until you get somewhere else that you realize that that was what was wrong. And I think that's what happened with you. We didn't realize what was wrong in middle school for him until he got to high school. And then we looked back and like, that's what was going on with you. He didn't even realize it himself. Correct?
Correct.
Can you discuss a particular instance or experience where you were super grateful for how you were raised? Or not grateful? This is a free space, safe space.
No, I'm pretty grateful. I'll say that.
You can actually tell me. I mean, if there are places that you feel like, okay, you know what, that you didn't like, you're an adult now. You can say that, and I can explain it. I'm like, hey, sorry that it didn't work out. That was not my thinking, but you're allowed to say that. I've always said that to you, though.
Yeah, you did always say that.
Okay.
So to go back to your question, super grateful for how you raised me. As I'm looking into the world, into the workforce, and seeing like my friends, seeing how they're like-minded, but also seeing how they're different from me too.
Mm-hmm.
And with those differences, I'm noticing how my childhood and your intentionality shaped how I am, which was, I'll go with another keyword, super deliberate.
Super deliberate.
Yeah.
One of the things that you may not know about Charles is he's very articulate and he writes really well. Do you want to tell us how you started to write?
Yeah. So I started writing. So back, I don't know what age this was, but like
It was like 6.
like 6, 7.
It was like 6 or 7.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I love watching TV. I love watching Dragon Ball.
And you liked a lot of TV. You liked a lot of that. You had Teletubbies. I can walk through your different TV shows.
Yeah.
Teletubbies, Thomas the Tank, Dragon Ball Z, Mario.
Yeah.
You had a SpongeBob phase.
Yeah.
You had a Tweety Looney Tunes phase. You had all of them. I used to use all of the TV shows that he watched as examples. I watched them with him, but they were also used as examples to explain things to him.
Yeah.
Okay.
And with that, she would like, before I could watch TV on certain days, like on Saturdays, I would have to write on either my week or a topic that she picked. And then eventually the topics went away. It was just like a free write until then.
No, actually, it was free write. This the other way around. It was free write first. Free write because I was like, I don't know what the heck he needs to write. I had read it somewhere that you needed to give kids some type of structure and order in order for them to become the people you want them to be. So I'm like, okay, so how do I get this dude to write? Because I loved writing.
Yeah.
And so initially it was, I would write you a letter. Let me tell you how we really started. Okay. I would write you a letter and I would say you should write me one back. And then after that, it was just tell me something that was good about your day. And then after good about your day, then we went from that to tell me about your week. And then from week, then there was a website that I used to go for prompts. And it would be just give a prompt, write about the Statue of Liberty, or they're just random. How would you think about the state versus this? And you're like, oh God. But those are the prompts. The reason why I bring that up is you have, as parents, you have moments that you can shape these things in your child. For him, it was I wanted him to be articulate. So I made sure that he had to argue and tell me. What did you have to tell me?
Tell me why.
Yep. If he did anything, he had to tell me the why. I encouraged him to argue with me. The more he argued with me, the more outspoken he became. I never hushed him. Did you ever feel that you didn't have a voice?
No.
No,
Still don't.
No, you still don't. Even though people think you're quiet, I'm like, no.
No.
Even if I say I don't agree with something, he'd be like, why? The same why that I used to ask him when he was little, he gives it back to me.
Yeah.
Do you think that you are, with all of that, all of these things as parents, I think that we don't realize how much power we have. Do you think that you're going to be a similar parent like your mom, or you're going to be less intentional? I mean, you can say that, you can say whatever you want. It's
No.
your cause.
I definitely want to be intentional.
You want to be intentional?
Hands-on.
Hands-on?
Yeah.
Let me tell you one thing that he said to me recently. He said he was never going to have kids because of a job that he had worked at.
Oh, yeah.
So, you want to share that story?
This was 2024, and like 2-3 years ago, I was working at American Dream. And I was at the lifeguard at the water park, very first lifeguarding job that I got. And I remember coming back one day after like my first couple of shifts. I was like, I don't want kids.
Like, who are you trying to kill? Whose dreams are you trying to kill and not give me no grandkids? Why do you not want to have kids? And you said?
Because the water park is mostly for kids. We'll just say that kids, younger adults. So obviously for like 10 plus hours a day, I would be seeing kids basically run wild throughout the park, and I had to basically manage them, make sure they're okay.
I think there was one particular instance that you brought up, though. You said that you literally told what to do and they refused to listen. And I had to remind you, like, dude, you used to be, you don't always listen yourself either. You listen a lot, but like kids, you start think you know what you're doing until something happens. And then something happened. I think you had an incident that actually happened with one of the kids, and you're like,
yeah. Okay, so I remember what you're talking about. So there's this one it's one attraction, yeah. So you have to know how to swim before you go on the ride. So we always ask the people on the rides, especially the little kids, the adults even too, we still have to ask because there's some adults who don't know how to swim. But there was this one instance where I was on the ride and I was like, okay, asking the usual question, do you know how to swim? And he's like, yeah, I know how to swim. I do this, and that. I'm like, are you sure? Because there's some tells that you would eventually see that, like, oh, they don't know how to swim, or they're not too comfortable in the water. He seemed okay, but like his head, I'm like, are you sure? He's like, yeah, I'm sure. And then I looked at the other lifeguard and he looked at me. I'm like, I don't know, I'm feeling a little hesitant. You think I should let him go? He's like, yeah. We let him go. 5 seconds in, he started waddling before. So
he almost drowned.
He didn't drown, but he was like that first stage before you drown, where you just be like splashing the water, trying to grab on him. And I was,
Lord.
And thankfully there was a lifeguard. There's lifeguard stations around the pool, so they got him out quick. But still, that didn't look too great on me.
And then what did that why did that make you say that though? Why did it make you feel like you're never having kids?
Because in my mind, this was like 2-3 years ago, so I was like 18 at the time. I was thinking, I was seeing a lot of like patterns in what I was seeing. I'm like a lot of like not so great examples of children being brought up, kind of being running wild, not thinking correctly, not speaking correctly.
But that's not what, instead of you automatically saying that you're not doing it, why didn't you remember the fact that that's just not you though? If anything, I think that was the moment that you actually started to tell me that was the way. I think that, honestly, if I'm being honest, that was the moment that we had that shift and you started to say to me, I love you and thank you for raising me right.
Yeah, because I never think of myself as like an outlier. I just think of me as me.
Why do you not think of yourself? Why don't you remember how you were raised in those moments?
I always assume that other people are kind of raised similarly when they're not.
Could that be because your friend, the UN friends, the friends that were picked by us, that ones that you have, we're kind of all similar.
Yeah.
And so because all of your friends are similar, you didn't really see any other people acting or being a certain way.
Yeah.
Now, when did it start to occur? When did it start to hit you outside of that job? When was the other instance that you started to realize that you were different?
Even in college a little bit, I realized I was different.
A little? College was like your main culture shock.
Yeah.
I think you started to see it a little bit when you started working.
Yeah.
And then?
Even like this year, I'm noticing how where I am versus where some other people are is very different.
Agreed. But it has a lot to do, would you say that that has a lot to do with intentionality and how you were raised? Did it give you a better way to look back on your past and see it from a different view?
Yes, definitely.
Definitely. Do you think that did that help you? Do you wish that you were more like your friends, or do you like where you are? Because it always seems, sometimes you tell me, not all of your friends, because most of your friends that are scattered all over the world are similarly just like you.
Yeah.
But I mean, when you are around different types of people, does it make you feel isolated?
At times it can be isolated, but I am happy for where I am.
Okay. Are you able to, do you feel fulfilled and happy where you are when it seems like you're just the only one there? What do you do in those moments?
Think of the future. Think of like
future.
how it's going to help me in the long term. Not so much really thinking about the present, because the present can be fleeting.
Present. Okay, present can be fleeting. Okay. Can you give us an example of something that has happened recently that has had you even more appreciative? You gave us an example of one that happened with your working and kids. What about in college right now? Too deep a question?
No, it's not too deep.
Try to pick one?
Yeah.
Okay.
So noticing where my differences were, like my work ethic, mainly, that's where I'm really noticing like I'm ahead of some of my peers in that sense. Or
did you remember somebody helping you work on that, your work ethic?
Oh, yes.
What year did I work on that work ethic?
I think the same year where I started this lifeguarding job.
It was 2 years. Well,
yeah, that was 2 years.
Freshman year was when I was like, hey, your work ethic needs to change. The thing with me and intentional parent is I pick projects. I can't, and this is good advice for any parent out there. You have to pick different parts of your child and work on them. And you'll know how will you know when that moment is done and you don't need to work on it anymore? When they take it on and they're doing it on their own. So for him, I worked on his work ethic because at one point in time when he first started college, I said to him, I think we had tried. No, he'd had a job. He'd had a job in high school.
Yes.
You had a job where you were working in a doctor's office because we thought he was going to be a medical student. And when we realized that wasn't going to work out, we switched to finance. But in order to try out the medical school or to try out being a doctor or just a surgeon, actually, when we're trying to try that out, we had him shadow one. In between this shadow session, he was getting paid and he was working, but it was, again, he wasn't really dealing and mingling with people. He was just mingling with that doctor and other doctors. He was the anesthesiologist, the surgeon, and then that was it. So he didn't really mingle. Afterwards, then you started to.
Yeah.
It was when you got to American Dream and then you did all the other lifeguarding jobs. You got to see other people like in depth because you're working with them consistently. But my point is, I had to push for that. When he was a freshman in college, he said, oh, I don't think that I can work. That was your exact words to me.
Yeah.
And you have to tell the story.
Because that's when I was juggling, first year of me juggling school and swim at like a higher level. So I was like, oh, I don't need a job. I have I have 2 full-time jobs being a student.
2 full-time jobs. And now
now I have a job on campus, and I'm still a student, and I'm still a swimmer. Yeah.
And you're chasing up on a whole bunch of other things. At every available moment, you're working.
Yes.
But the reason why I'm bringing that up is sometimes when you're telling these kids things, the first time you tell them, they're not going to get it. One thing I am is
intentional
and
deliberate
and
serious, obviously.
patient.
You are patient
I'm
as well.
very patient because I have to. Some of the time when you're telling any of your kids anything, they're not going to take it the first time. They never do. It takes them time to get to where you want them to get to, but you will notice at a certain point that they will take it on. Final thought. What advice would you give to any other parent about being intentional?
So, to the parents or whom it may concern, I think starting it from the beginning, any thoughts or anything you want to instill upon your child, start it from the very beginning when they're as young as possible. Don't expect them to be fully grown adults or teens trying to instill something upon them that's even intentional or patience or anything along those lines, because it won't stick as well.
Late. Yeah. Well, thank you, son.
Of course.
I will say that parenting has been a joy for me, especially parenting this young man right here. I look at his life and I say to myself that his life is what the kind of parent I am now is the kind of parent that I wish I had. And that's what I do in general in life. I try to be the spouse that I can be, the kind that I would have wanted, and I try to be the parent that I would have wanted as well. And so when I look at his life, and I look at everything that's happening with it, it fills me with joy and happiness that I was able to achieve that. That's also something that all of you can achieve too. If you can think it, then you just need to find a way to make it happen. Thank you, producer Marv, for your assistance as always. Thank you to my guest, Charles Fagbohun, one who I love so deeply.
Love you too.
My intentional child.
Yes. The intentional child.
The intentional child. And thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of Deliberately Intentional. You can catch us on Wednesdays on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple. Follow as well and leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you guys. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.